The talk you're about to hear is by Zen teacher Sensei Amala Wrightson.
Today is Tuesday the 10th of September 2019, and this is the second part of a teisho drawing on a story in The Hidden Lamp, Stories from 25 Centuries of Awakened Women, edited by Florence Kaplow and Susan Moon. And the story that we're looking at is entitled in this collection, Dōgen Sets the Record Straight. And we'll just start by reading the whole thing. Master Eihei Dōgen said to his monks, "There are foolish monks who make a vow never to look at a woman. Is this vow based on the teachings of the Buddhas, or on the teachings of the non-Buddhists, or on the teachings of Mara? What are the inherent faults of women, and what are the inherent virtues of men? There are unwholesome men, and there are unwholesome women. Hoping to hear the Dharma and attain liberation does not depend on being female or male. Before becoming free from delusion, men and women are equally not free from delusion. At the time of being free from delusion and realizing the truth, there is no difference between men and women. If you vow never to look at a woman, must you then abandon women when you chant beings are numberless, I vow to save them? If you do so, you are not a bodhisattva. How can you call it the Buddha's compassion?" So last week we really just covered most of the Buddha's life. I don't recall exactly where we got to. I think we had got up to the account of Master Dogen's Great Awakening, when his Chinese teacher Ru Jing discovered one of the monks in the zendo dozing one evening, and he scolded the monk, saying, "The practice of Zazen is the dropping away of body and mind. What do you expect to accomplish by dozing?" And it was on hearing these words that Dogen realized enlightenment, his mind just completely emptying out and his eye opening fully. And so realizing that something momentous had happened, he went to the master's room to be tested. And so which was the tradition, he burnt some incense and bowed down, prostrated himself before his master. And then Ru Jing, knowing full well what was going on, asked, "What do you mean by this?" And Dogen replied that he experienced the dropping away of body and mind. And then Ru Jing said, "You have indeed dropped body and mind." At this point, Dogen started to kind of resist or question. He said, "I have only just realized enlightenment. Don't sanction me so easily." So he's not thinking about himself. He wants rigor from his teacher. And the teacher replies, "I'm not sanctioning you easily." And then Dogen says, "What is the basis for your saying that you haven't sanctioned me easily?" And then Ru Jing says, "Body and mind dropped away." Hearing this, Dogen prostrated himself before his master in deep respect and gratitude, showing that he had indeed transcended his discriminating mind. After this experience, he kept on training at Tiantong Temple there in South China, and stayed for about another 2 years training under Ru Jing. Of course, this is just really important, that the training doesn't stop with an enlightenment experience, but needs to be deepened and refined afterwards. Dogen actually talks about this. He says the Buddhist trainee can be compared to a fine piece of timber and a true master to a good carpenter. When quality wood will not show its fine grain until it is worked on by a good carpenter. Even a warped piece of wood will, if handled by a good carpenter, soon show the results of good craftsmanship. The truth or falsity of enlightenment depends on whether or not one has a true master. This should be understood. Eventually, he did decide to return to Japan, and at that point, Rujing gave him various items, including a traditional outer robe, the case, and various texts, and also a portrait of himself for Dogen to take back to Japan. And now we could call these different items taonga. They were you'd say symbolic of the transmission that Dogen had received from his teacher. His teacher said when Dogen was parting, "With all sincerity, I give these to you, a foreign monk. I hope you will propagate true Buddhism throughout your country, thereby saving deluded people. You should not live in cities or other places of human habitation. Rather, stay clear of kings and ministers. Make your home in deep mountains and remote valleys, transmitting the essence of Zen Buddhism forever, if even only to a single true Bodhi seeker." Actually, when Dogen did get back to Japan, he was to stay in Kyoto, in the midst of kings and ministers and human habitation for I think it was 16 years, and it was only after those 16 years that he moved his congregation to the mountains on the Japan Sea coast. We don't have time now to go into the reasons, but it is notable that Dogen was involved in quite, to some degree, in the politics and activities of the city before he went. He moved to the mountains. And he was to train others in Japan until his death in 1253. This passage we're looking at is from his great work, the Shobogenzo. It's a fascicle entitled Eihei Dōgen, and he wrote it about 1240, the year 1240, when he was still in Kyoto. And this Eihei Dōgen translates as roughly making a prostration and attaining the marrow. Making a prostration and attaining the marrow. Eihei means to prostrate oneself, toku, to attain, and zui means marrow. And this marrow, attaining the marrow, is an important kind of image that goes back to Bodhidharma. And Bodhidharma asked his closest disciples for an expression of the truth, and Huike, who became the second Chinese ancestor, remained silent. His Japanese name is Eka, and Dogen said that he had attained the marrow, so the core, the essence, you could say, of the teaching. But this title, as so often the case with with Dogen, you can read it in different ways. If we take the marrow to mean the truth or liberation, we can take it as prostrating to attainment of the marrow, in the sense of revering people who have liberated themselves, whether they're male or female. This is an important theme of the whole fascicle. Or you could understand it as prostrating as attainment of the marrow, in the sense that having deep reverence for the Dharma, for the truth, is indispensable to awakening itself. So both these are at play in his teaching. This comes out at in the first part of the fascicle. Just read a little bit of it before we get to our central text. He says, "When we practice supreme and perfect enlightenment, it is very difficult to receive instruction from a good master. It does not matter whether the master is a man or a woman. The only requirement is attainment of the way and accessibility." Attainment of the way and accessibility. Accessibility is an interesting one here, because obviously if there's an enlightened master and you don't have access, then it's not much good. There has to be this contact. Goes on, "After we've met a true master, we must sever all old relationships, stop wasting time, and practice the way earnestly with great effort. We must continue to practice regardless of how much or how little expectation we have. We should attend to this practice immediately with all our might. If we study like this, those who slander the law will not trouble us. The story about the patriarch who cut off his arm and attained his master's marrow is not about someone else. The story is extreme story, you could say, of Hui Ke cutting his arm off to express his sincerity to Bodhidharma, Dogen says, is not about someone else. It really is about us and how we practice. How do we practice sincerely? And it's going to be different for each of us, but to whatever we think of as our limits, we're called upon in practice to go beyond them. To be willing to go through hardship, loss even. We are already the teacher who has cast off body and mind. And again, it's not that we cast off body and mind in order to get somewhere, but that already that cast off body and mind is our true nature. And we realize that truth through our devotion. And really this is besides the emphasis on the equality of women and men in the practice and realization of the Dharma, this is another one of the main themes that Dogen is playing with in this fascicle. The intimate relationship that exists between making a prostration, bowing down before the Dharma, and realizing that Dharma. He says, attainment of the marrow of one's master and transmission of the Dharma is accomplished through sincerity and true faith. Sincerity and true faith do not come from either outside or inside. The Dharma is of far more value than our small body. Abandon the secular world and follow the way. If we think we are of more value than the Dharma, it will never be transmitted, received, or attained. So he says to abandon the secular world. Doesn't mean here that we have to leave worldly things behind, but that we have to abandon our attachments to those things. Work in a non-attached way as much as we can, and to be willing to experience discomfort, both, and everybody knows about physical discomfort when we're sitting, but also the discomfort of facing ourselves. Later, Master Dōgen quotes the Buddha. He said, "When you meet a master who proclaims supreme enlightenment, do not be overly concerned with his social status or nationality, his appearance, his faults, or his behavior. He should be highly respected because of his wisdom, so provide him daily with good food, honor him with heavenly food and celestial flowers. Every day pay him homage with three prostrations, and keep all evil thoughts from arising. If you do such things, surely there will be a way to enlightenment. Ever since I first developed the resolve for enlightenment, I have continually practiced like that and attained supreme and perfect enlightenment right up to the present day." And the way it's translated here at least, it's not that he attained it once, but he continued to attain it, day by day, moment by moment. Therefore, and this is Dōgen speaking now, therefore you should ask trees and stones to proclaim the Dharma. Seek out rice paddies and villages to hear their explanations. Question round pillars and study walls and tiles. So it's beautiful because he takes this passage from the Buddha and gives it an entirely new twist in terms of what we might be paying homage to, what we might be listening to for the Dharma. Pillars, walls, tiles. Once Indra made a prostration to a fox and asked him about the Dharma. That fox was called a great bodhisattva. The fox's action was independent of noble or ignoble Dharma. Reading this reminded me of a time when I was doing a solo retreat when I was given some teaching by a fox. It was deep winter, it was February and very, very cold, and I was staying in this little cottage in the midst of fields, farm fields, and each day I did more or less a sesshin schedule, but would take a walk every afternoon, early evening. And on this particular occasion, I saw across the field a fox that it had caught a mouse or a rat. I couldn't see clearly exactly what, but this fox was so happy about this that she was throwing it's a little bit grisly, sorry about this, but it's exactly an illustration of what Dogen's talking about, because he says here, the fox's action was independent of noble or ignoble karma. So it was throwing up this mouse and catching it and throwing it in the air and catching it. Hopefully the mouse was already dead. But what even though this isn't a particularly noble action, what the fox showed me was playfulness. And it was just what I needed at that time in terms of how to work with my koan. I had the tendency to kind of get grim with it and be sort of treating it as a locked box that I had to sort of find my way into. And instead of taking it more lightly, playing, exploring, dancing with, as this fox was dancing with its little catch, whatever it was. And if we are really engaging with the practice, whatever our practice is, then we'll receive these teachings. They're everywhere actually, and it's really just a matter of getting quiet enough to notice them. Question round pillars and study walls and tiles. Dōgen goes on to say, however, foolish people who have never heard the Buddhist Dharma consider themselves great bhikkhus, monks, and refuse to make prostrations to young people who have attained the Dharma. They say, we have practiced for many years and refuse to make prostrations to those who began to study late in life and then attained the Dharma. Since we have acquired the title of master, we cannot make prostrations to those without that title. Or we are in charge of regulations and should not make prostrations to ordinary monks just because they have attained the Dharma. So he's talking here always about people, monks and others who have some insight. Or we are senior priests and cannot make prostrations to lay men or women who have attained the Dharma. Or we are sages and saints who cannot should not be required to make prostrations to nuns who have attained the Dharma. He goes on with other examples. He says, such foolish people uselessly leave their fatherland and wander through other countries and never see or hear the Buddhist way. They in some different ways, close themselves off. They cling to their sense of self, and that becomes more important than waking up to the Dharma, being open to, or having the humility to ask for teaching from others who they might consider to be inferior in some way in terms of status. And Dōgen brings up the famous story, which people may have heard, when Joshu, Zhao started to go on pilgrimage. This was late in his life. He had, I think he was 56 when he left the temple of his master Nansen. He said, I will ask instruction from anyone with superior knowledge, even if he is a child of 7, and will not talk with anyone who is inferior, even if he is 100. Instead, I will teach him. So, is abandoning all those ways, those dichotomies by which we categorize people, male, female, young and old, and so forth. Dōgen says, asking a child of 7 about the Dharma and making a prostration before him, even though we are much older, is very praiseworthy and the right-minded attitude of an ancient Buddha. Also, when a monk who is seeking the way in the Buddhist Brotherhood meets a nun who has attained both the way and the Dharma and makes a prostration and asks her about the law, it is an excellent illustration of true Buddhist study. It is like quenching a severe thirst. in stating this, Dogen was going against an old rule that was instituted sometime in early Buddhism and attributed to the Buddha. We don't know if it came from him or not. There's questions around that, but it was taken to be a teaching from the Buddha that a very senior nun should always make a prostration and bow down to the most junior monk. So it was kind of preserving conventions of patriarchy within the Buddhist order. It was the first of the 8 rules, and although the Buddha's stepmother, who started the sangha of nuns, accepted that rule when she was. The story goes that she accepted it, but then later asked if the Buddha would reverse that rule because it was seen as being against the kind of the basic understanding of seniority within a religious organization. Dogen's teaching here was unusual for his time. He was very emphatically championing women as equal partners. So much so that in the 20th century, the early 20th century, when the Soto nuns were trying to reclaim their place and get more equal treatment, they quoted this particular fascicle of the Shobogenzo. And just one example of just how unequal they were, the Soto Shu, the Soto church, sect of Zen, in 1900 gave each monk 180,000 yen per year and 600 yen to each nun. So there was a lot of inequality. Even today, we could say that Dogen's views are not widely shared across the whole of Buddhism. Until quite recently in Tibetan Buddhism, nuns were instructed to pray that they be reborn as men so that they could come to full enlightenment. And in certain parts of Thailand, in northern Thailand, there are stupas and sanctuaries and monasteries around which women are not allowed to circumambulate. Stray dogs and cats can wander in and out, but no women are allowed in. So these things remain within our tradition. But although Dogen's views weren't all that widely shared, they were quite exceptional. They did have an influence in subsequent generations. Keizan, who is credited with popularizing the tradition that Dogen brought from China and really introducing it to the masses, so to speak. He was 3 generations after Dogen. He actually gave transmission to a female Dharma heir, Ekkyu Daishi. Both Keizan's mother and his grandmother were important influences for him, both in terms of support and inspiration. And his grandmother had been a student of Dogen's teacher Myozan and also of Dogen, so she was like a direct connection back to Dogen for Keizan. Unfortunately, there aren't any records of her teaching. We know of her, but we don't know, we have no sense of what she taught or how. So now just turning back to the passage from Hidden Lamp, and we'll just have a quick look at it in slightly more detail. So, Master Eihei Dōgen said to his monks, "There are foolish monks who make a vow never to look at a woman. Is this vow based on the teachings of the Buddhas, or on the teachings of the non-Buddhists, or on the teachings of Mara?" Well, I think it's not so hard to answer this rhetorical question of Master Dogen's. Mara is, of course, the Buddhist equivalent of the devil, the divider, the deceiver. And what Mara does is, you'd say, is separation. So to make a vow never to look at a woman, what message does that send to girls and women? It suggests that they're in some inherent way dangerous, impure, temptresses. We could say this stuff is familiar from across different cultures. Or we could say that somehow women are inherently anti-spiritual. Rita Gross, who's written a very fine book looking into patriarchy and Buddhism, says the most sort of understanding way of you could say charitable way of understanding this impulse, which seems to be so strong, is that this projection of impurity and temptation and so forth onto women by people in religion. You could say, especially for monastics, it's a way of expressing their struggle with renunciation. So if we understand it that way, then it's a projection of the monastic struggle to renounce attachments. So the attachment gets melded, fused with the female sex. And the trouble with this is that when you've got a whole culture doing this into kind of projection, then it takes along a lot of weight and it's very damaging. And women often end up kind of internalizing that patriarchal thinking and making all kinds of assumptions, often unconscious assumptions, about what it is to be female, what it is to be male, how we relate to males and females. In the Hidden Lamp, each of these passages from the whole history of Buddhism are paired up with a woman teacher's commentary, and this particular one, Dogen Sets the Record Straight, is paired up with a comment by a Soto teacher and priest, Catherine Thanas, who taught in Santa Cruz, California. Actually, passed away in 2012. So I guess they got this from her before she died. But she offers another kind of approach to to this passage. Here's what she says. As I was considering this passage, I found a line from Rumi. There is man and woman and a third thing too in us. That's the end of the quote. Maybe that sums up my exploration of this koan about men and women and their prospects for liberation in this life. Some years ago, a student transgendered in our Sangha. When she told me about her decision to do this, I did not know what was entailed, but I found resistance inside myself as she started the hormonal changes that made possible her transformation into a man's body. What does it mean to be a woman, a man? Is it an inner or outer thing? I felt grief when my student initially told me about her plans and realized how deeply I had bonded with her as a woman. Although she told me she wasn't going away, I didn't know what might be the outcome of this profound change. Maybe she didn't know either. She educated me with written material and told me that not infrequently doctors decide which gender to assign to a newborn infant when the genitalia were unclear. This was interesting information at the theoretical level, but I still found myself using her instead of him and she instead of he. This felt unintentional, but looking back, I wonder if inside I wanted to continue to relate to the woman I had known, not the man she was turning into. As time passed, she took her place as male in our community and began to express himself straightforwardly in a clear voice instead of remaining mostly quiet as she had been before. Even though I found that his essence remained the same regardless of his outer form, the question of gender continued to feel immutable for me, an essential characteristic. I saw how important the distinction between male and female was for me, and I acknowledged that I engaged with male and female students differently, have different expectations of myself with each, and different expectations of them as Sangha members. I think this is a very interesting point, that we can have all these sort of unspoken assumptions about and automatic things we do in relating to men differently to women. And we can find it threatening when someone doesn't clearly read for us as one or the other, as male or female. Because when that happens, you can't put that person into a box and sort of relate to them in a habitual kind of way. We were talking this morning over breakfast about a transgender teenager that one of us knows who gets bullied at school just for the way she looks, because the kids find it threatening. How dare does this person not fit my preconceptions about what a female should look like, and how uncomfortable one can feel when one doesn't know how to relate to this person who's before us. It's quite often quite unconscious what our assumptions are, because they're so ingrained. And my guess is that they start out really early. We start processing the people we meet and relating to them in different ways very early on. Even small children know about boy and girl and man and woman. Just one example of this is the way that little children can react to Richard when they meet him. Even when they're quite small, say about 3, they read him as a grown-up, as a man, and yet they're confused by his stature, and you can see their little brains trying to figure it out. What's going on here? So already they've internalized an idea of what a man is. From the Buddhist point of view, gender is not something innate, but it's conditioned. Actually, there's nothing that is innate. There are no fixed essences or traits anywhere, according to Buddhism. No, none of our qualities are inherent or immutable. So, if that's the case, then it becomes this basic kind of fundamental mistake to categorize people on the basis of appearances. And within our sutra, there are sutra tradition. There are quite a few accounts of bodhisattvas who transform themselves from females into males and males into females. The whole kind of sub-theme that goes on within the sutras. In a sense, from a Buddhist point of view, you could say that we're all trans. We're all beings in transition, fluid, not fixed. I think I'm running out of time a little bit, but so I haven't got time to go into in detail. But probably one of the most enjoyable and amusing of these transformations is in the Vilamakirti Sutra, and I'd recommend that people look that up. Just to finish up the rest of our passage. So, the second paragraph. What are the inherent faults of women, and what are the inherent virtues of men? There are unwholesome men, and there are unwholesome women. Hoping to hear the Dharma and attain liberation does not depend upon being male or female. So Dōgen again is coming back to this point of what is important is to arouse the desire to realize the truth. To cultivate the bodhicitta, the aspiration to awaken in order to be able to awaken others. Before becoming free from delusion, men and women are equally not free from delusion. At the time of being free from delusion and realizing the truth, there is no difference between men and women. When we realize the truth, then we realize that each and every one of us is a node of the whole universe, where each of us is at the absolute center of things. Each of us, equally. Think of that thing that the mathematician Nicholas of Cusa said. God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. And this characterization is now being confirmed by modern cosmology, that each of us is at the very center of an expanding universe, expanding out in all directions. If you vow never to look at a woman, must you then abandon women when you chant, beings are numberless, I vow to save them? All beings without number, I vow to liberate. All beings. If you do so, you are not a bodhisattva. How can you call it the Buddha's compassion? So, Dōgen in this passage, which comes near the end of the Eihei Tokusui, is inviting us actually to look at each other, to regard the one we may think of as other. It's really an admonition to his monks, and he was talking to monks in this versicle. An admonition for his monks to actually see women, to see them not as some tempting object, but as fellow sentient beings, aspiring to wake up just as these monks were themselves. We'll stop here and recite the 4 vows. All beings without number, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates beyond measure, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. All beings without number, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates beyond measure, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. All beings without number, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates beyond measure, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain.
The teaching you have received is offered freely. If you would like to make a donation to support the continuation of this podcast service or learn more about practice opportunities at the Auckland Zen Centre, please visit www.aucklandzen.org.nz.